So, first of all, last week's mailbox. A lot of people got this right. This seemed spectacularly easy. It was indeed Warsong Hold in Borean Tundra. So, on to this week's. So, again, all you have to do is say in the comments below where you believe this mailbox is. So, what we need is the zone that it's in and the specific location. Specific location just means like the location as it would be written on the map. You don't have to say, oh, by the third step or anything like that. So that's this week's mailbox. So on to a few comments then. Where are they? I've completely lost them. So here we go, the Uther comment. So it says, Uther's new model at the grave statue looks much more Kulturan-ish now. Now, before I sort of show you what it looks like now and then, for anyone who haven't seen the new one, it's very nice. It's worth going to have a look. But I did note in earlier, when Alpha first came out, Borrelus, the main city for the Alliance in Kulturas, wasn't finished. It took a long time to finish because it's got to be in different phases. There's different phases of that, not least of which because there's a dungeon that's based around an attack on it. But there was lots of placeholder stuff there. And there was one where they'd taken the Uther statue from Stormwind and used that as one placeholder thing. And then there were a load of Silver Hand, in other words, Paladin, tombs all over the place. And I was thinking, okay, well, all right, they're placeholder because they exist in the game elsewhere. And I'm sure they'll do new assets for the game. But isn't it strange they've chosen to use Paladin ones? And I thought there was something a little curious about that. But anyway, we'll have a look at the things. So, this is how Uther used to look at Uther's grave. Some of you may be looking at it and going, isn't that still what it looks like? No, I've changed it. So now what it looks like is this. Much nicer, much shinier. Now, what you might look at it, and you can easily, if you're familiar with the Kulturan armor sets and things like that, I don't just mean the ones we get, but the ones the NPCs wear, there's a lot of similarities with it. However, I think the reason for that is that this is just new, and the art team, with the Kulturan stuff, went in a different direction. There always seems to be, in lots of different departments, something new with each expansion, and the art team's no different. And if you haven't seen them yet, particularly the Kulturan humans look spectacular compared with how they would have been realised in previous expansions. Absolutely spectacular. So I think the reason why there are certain similarities you could draw between the armour that Uther is wearing in this statue and the Kulturan stuff is just because they've done things, it's just more in the same sort of detail. It's a similar sort of artist and they've done similar sort of things. But you'll notice the Kulturan armour has one very noticeable thing, which has anchor motifs everywhere. This one doesn't. So I don't think it's intended to be that. I think, Uther is still Uther. I think it's just supposed to be an example of the newer art style in general, which would have applied if they've done it for anything, for any sort of region. But it does look very nice. It's worth going over there. The curious thing I had, because I don't know why they've done it. That's what gets me. It's like, it looked fine before. It looks much better now, don't get me wrong. It looks way better. And I'm not even showing it all its glory here. This is just the image of Uther itself. Just the area around the outside of it has been changed. But I'm thinking to myself, why? Because it's not like Uther's tomb. It featured in Legion. It formed the very start of the Paladin Ashbringer quest. But it's not like Uther's tomb has been damaged or desecrated any storylines in Legion. It was still as it was. So I'm not quite sure what the need is for the redesign, unless it's supposed to be related to something that's coming to Lordaeron. I'm not sure. It just seems a little bit odd to me. Bit odd. But there you go. Right, let's get rid of all this. On to the next one. So the gold missions. So, okay, I was talking about things that would be changing with the patch, and there's a number of people actually missing the gold missions. I mean, they'll be back for BFA, of course, but they did this for WoD as well. They don't want us going back to old content and getting gold easily. Now, of course, it was more of an issue in WoD because you had outside your garrison a chest that kept filling up with garrison resources, which you could have used on lots of different characters without doing anything to just send missions off. In Legion, you don't have any automatic source of order resources, so you have to go out and farm them. So someone here saying, you got up to 17 million gold thanks to running them on 14 characters. Now, just see, I never made a silly amount of gold even in WoD, because even though I had the characters to do it, just the idea of cycling around all those characters, sending missions off, and then cycling around again and collecting them all up was just couldn't be bothered. I don't have that much need for gold anyway, apart from at the start of an expansion. But in Legion, you'd also have to get the order resources to be able to fund those gold missions, even if you didn't worry too much about other types of missions. On 14 characters, to have enough order resources, even if you're farming it predominantly on one and you're using Bloods of Sargeras to give the order resource to others, that's still a fair amount of time that you're spent doing that. Bennett, you might have, millions of gold in Legion, but I think you've dropped down in the life stakes. I think you need to, I'm not going to say get out more, because especially in this heat, it's ridiculous. Do you know what? Oh my God. It was 1 o'clock yesterday, in the morning. 1 o'clock in the morning still. I was still awake. Eventually, that's when I decided to get up and finish off that mole machine video. Which is why it came out at such a weird time. And it was still 30 degrees in here. Because that's the thing, you sometimes people, like 30 degrees for those who prefer Fahrenheit. What's that? 86 Fahrenheit? And people go, oh yeah, it's 100 Fahrenheit and things like this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, do you mean outside? Because outside is, it's relevant if you are outside. But if you're inside, what is the temperature where you are right now? Because most of the people that live in the places where it gets to, over 40 degrees, or over 100 degrees, depending on what you prefer to say, tend to have it cooler inside. So what I'm talking about is where I was, in the middle, and this is the problem with these bloody houses that we have, these energy efficient houses, is even, and it was still like that when I eventually went to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was still the same temperature. It just maintains the temperature. Window open, made no difference. No bloody air moving around. And not just one window, other window open at this end, nothing passing through. Roasting I was. Anyway, irrelevant. So yeah, so don't go out, but you need to. 14 characters. How much time must you have spent to get all that gold? What do you even spend that gold on? Seriously. I mean, you'll be able to buy up all the very shiniest BOEs, I suppose, all the because there's 350 item level BOEs drop when you're leveling up. You're not likely to get them. I've got one on one character, and cursed my luck for wasting it on a beta. But just to give you some context, what 350 item level is, it's only 5 item levels below what normal Uldir gives you. So it's, you want some 350 item level gear. And I don't know how much it's going to cost or anything like that, but that's what you want it for. The rest of the expansion, I suppose some people raid the black market auction house for stuff, but on to the next one. So yeah, World Quest bosses. So I was saying, because people are saying, oh, is it just as easy as Legion? And most of the mobs, it's sort of all right. But there are certain World Quest mobs, or mobs where it suggests 3 players, where I'm saying, you do basically need those 3 players. Okay. Someone said on a Warlock, they were able to solo them. The Warlock, I suppose, and potentially Beastmaster Hunter might be 2 that could sort of, just about manage with them. At the gear levels we'll have when we're sort of leveling or get to level cap. But I was saying, yeah, there's some World Quest mobs, some tough ones, where you're not really soloing them. And no one's soloing them. Like, not even the Warlock thing. Some of them, you need a tank. And the tank alone won't solo it. Because this thing, someone's saying here, at the start of Legion, there were lots of things that people couldn't solo, like rares. But once people got geared up later, blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't true for me. I could solo them all. Not all as ret. Some of them I had to change to my prot spec. But there wasn't anything, apart from the world boss, there wasn't anything that walked the Broken Isles that one-on-one, obviously if you went to the island where Vault of the Wardens is and took on a whole load of those tough elites, yeah, you were going to get your head kicked in. But one-on-one, like if you went to a world quest where it was like one tough mob, and yeah, easier to do in a group, but I could solo those as a protection paladin in the gear that I had at the start before the raid opened up. Whereas this time in BFA, no. Not even as prot spec. Yeah, I think they are a cut above. They are definitely a cut above. And actually, just to give you some emphasis as well, because I mean, the toughest thing is not so much the health of a mob. What's tough about it is how hard it hits you. It doesn't matter how much health it have. That just means it takes longer to kill. But it is a bit of a reflection. So, for example, typical elite mobs that you can solo will have somewhere between, let's say, 100 and 250,000 health. Because remember, everything's been squished, you know. We're going to have somewhere between 50 and 80,000 health, round about the, you know. It depends how, you know, as we gear up, getting ready for the raid. So yeah, so the typical elite, somewhere between 100,000 health and 250,000 health, round about that ballpark. Then you come to some World Quest mobs that have got 1.5 million health. So, you know, not only would that take you a ridiculous amount of time to kill, but, you know, as a bit of a reflection as well of its health, it also smashes really hard as well. I'm not soloing those in any spec. So, yeah, I think there are different beasts in BFA for which you're going to want the group. And I know a lot of people have been sort of saying, oh, you know, nice time to take away the add-on, the Group Finder add-on. But, of course, I think Blizzard expect you to use the actual Group Finder tool. I was saying to this on stream, actually, in terms of the add-on, I can understand people's chagrin at the add-on being removed. But at the same time, well, one, I was just thinking probably it would just be used as a tool for war mode death squads anyway. But secondly, as long as... I don't mind Blizzard disabling the use of an add-on in general. In fact, I keep saying to about them that sometimes there are add-ons that are so stunningly popular, it's like people want these to cover up a deficiency in something in the game. And it's great that Blizzard sort of encouraged this. They've right from the start have not tried to really sit on add-ons at all. Obviously, certain ones that are going to what they term play the game for you, or just make it too trivial. Yeah, they stop those. But generally speaking, they support them. But sometimes I just feel to myself, well, look, there's this tool that everyone's been using for years. Why don't you just put it in game? Things like threat meters. I'm not saying so much damage meters, because I think Blizzard are wise to steer clear of those, because people play poorly as a result of trying to focus on increasing their throughputs and damage, healing, whatever. So it's always good for Blizzard to be able to say, well, if you're worried that you're not coming top of damage or top of this or passing high, well, you're talking about playing something that's third-party software, nothing to do with the game itself. But for other things, and the Group Finder, they would argue they have, because they have their own Group Finder thing. And even with tough quests, world quests, there's a little eye that you can click. But then someone was making the point that there are times, they are on at very off-peak times. And the issue then is the normal Group Finder thing is unlikely to find people quickly enough, whereas the add-on allowed them to do that. But it may be two things. One, that they're hoping it will encourage more people to use the communities, because it could be that as well. It could be a bit of a push to the communities area. And it could also be that without the add-on, people will adapt. And it might be that using the in-game tools becomes more useful as well. Maybe Blizzard feel that the in-game tools are just as good as that now, and if people just stop using the add-on, they'll find the in-game tools will work better in time. We will see. We shall see. Not that they've actually said anything like that, So on the old Ashbringer thing, yeah. It says, if the NPCs you see at the Artifact Retirement Quest are the actual class leaders, Lady Adrian has the Ashbringer and was probably the Paladin lead. No. My Ashbringer. I'm the one that's called High Lord. It's not Lady Liadrin's. And I have proof as well. So, if you go to the order hall, actually, this isn't live yet, is it? But it's in the beta at any rate. So, this is what Lady Liadrin looks like. Completely sans Ashbringer. She's got a sword and shield. It's not even a posh sword. It's not even like the art protection paladin artifact. It's just a rubbish shield. It's a fairly sized one, but it's still rubbish. And a pissy little sword which you can hardly see. You know, she's a protection paladin now. She still wears the silly shoulders, which is a bit annoying. Because I know when people told me, because someone told me that, oh, she changed for BFA, and I thought, oh, I'll go and have a look. Has she got rid of those ridiculous shoulders yet? No, she hasn't. But she has, she certainly does not have the Ashbringer. I have the Ashbringer. It might be drained now, but it's still my Ashbringer. Mine. So, there you go. What was the other one? It looks like there aren't duplicate spec NPCs between Horde and Alliance cutscenes. I would rather than the strange army of High Lords Blizz unleashed upon the Broken House. Well, the thing is, I mean, the Horde and Alliance, the whole point of the Order Halls was it's supposed to be something that crossed the faction divide. So there weren't supposed to be factions within the Order Halls. It was supposed to be, the Order Hall is a united group of paladins or druids or warriors or whatever. So the lead, the dedicated lead, which is me for paladins, remember, game said so. Blizzard doesn't lie about these things. It's not like they change things later on in the storyline either, is it? The whole point is that those ones are supposed to be ones that command the respect of both Horde and Alliance because they're fighting to save Azeroth or something like that, and they're not worried about the petty politics of their own respective factions. Right, where's the next one? Oh, yes. So this was about patch day that we had this week. So this was obviously before it. So it's saying Europe will have to wait till the 18th. Saying it as if it's a bad thing. And what people need to realise is that the real, when patches are released, content patches are actually released on Wednesdays in Europe. And that's when they get their global release, really. The Tuesday releases are there as a final test. So what North America does, is very kind of them, is that they test it all for us. And that's when everything goes wrong. They report to Blizzard, and Blizzard fix it all. So it's all nice and smooth on the proper launch day, on the Wednesday. Unfortunately, they didn't seem to make a very good job of it this week, because we went from a point where we had... so in our guild, we've been clearing Mythic and Taurus in one night. There was 1 week, actually, recently, where it was pretty bad, and we had to go off and polish it off the following night, but didn't take that long. I think there's a few new people there and a few issues. But anyway, yeah. Whereas this week, we've done 2 full nights, and we still have dogs. God, Bennett. They give me nightmares. What have they done to the dogs? There's still Iminar, Kingaroth, because you can't kill Kingaroth until you've killed Iminar. And Argus. There's still 4 bosses left after 2 full nights. And I don't know about Kingaroth, but in the case of the other 3, the 3 which basically not been able to kill quickly, all of them have got things broken with them. What have they done? Because I'm used to, before the pre-patch came out, I was thinking, well, the typical way these things work is if you're in a guild, as I have been, where you've already cleared the dungeon, the raid, on the highest difficulty. You're already used to basically clearing it in a night. You now go in and you knock it over in half a night because everything dies so quickly. It's just bish, bash, bosh, done, gone. Because, the power level has increased. Now, even given that we're supposed to have lost some power because of our artifact draining, and it's possible that Blizzard tried very hard. They haven't said anything about this, or not that I know of. I have watched their Q&A. It might be that they deliberately tried hard to keep it at the same level as it was before, to emphasise the fact that rather than feeling much stronger, which we have in previous expansions, because we've lost our artifacts, or at least they've been drained, I've still got the Ashbringer, remember, that, that's why they've tried to do that. But because they've broken a load of things, it hasn't worked out, Tanks have been dying quite easily because, they've got a tougher time protecting themselves against certain types of damage, and Blizzard have done something about that now. But I'm still looking at hot fixes, and I'm thinking, well, this is, days later. And there's still some bosses I'm looking at and thinking, You haven't said anything about them bosses yet. It's like, what? So, you know, I don't know. I think we might have one tonight, which we don't normally raid on a Sunday, but I think just to get it done, we might be doing. I think we were taking names to see who could do it. I'll have to check later. But, you know, here we are at the weekend, and it still hasn't been cleared. Doing a proper week's raiding. What? You know, I'm not used to it at this time. Not used to it. Right, on to the next one. Yes, the Arcane Torrent bullying. So, Arcane Torrent being alone, stuck on the GCD, is such a mean-spirited change. Hashtag Belf Justice. I don't know that this... Sometimes they do mean-spirited things. Whether this one is or not, I'm not sure. Again, they haven't addressed it. It's so annoying. You know, so... And I don't understand why they wouldn't just come out and say it on the Q&A. You know, why do they have to be so silent on certain things? Because what happened was... Obviously, with the GCD debacle, they've taken a few things off. And one thing they said is they're going to take off racials from... So racials won't be on the GCD and unused trinkets won't be on the GCD. They relented on those. So people are going, okay, great. And then, you know, as time went by, people were noticing that Arcane Torrent on the beta was still on the GCD. You know, weeks went by, still on the GCD. Now we've got everything's gone live, still on the GCD. And people are going, I don't think they're going to take it off the GCD at this point. We're sort of worked out they're not going to take it off. But, you know, I've asked, they've asked, other people have asked, that is, and Blizzard haven't said anything. They haven't said, all they have to do is to come out and say something like, look, too many people play Blood Elves. Too many of you. We want it a bit more spread out in terms of the races people play. So, we think the problem is Arcane Torrent is too strong. So, we've taken away the interrupt and we're keeping it on the global cooldown to stop it just being too appealing. To spread you out a bit more, we want a few more ugly races in the Horde. You are supposed to be the Monster's Ball. If they just came out and said that, you know, at least we'd know where we are, and at least they've had the balls to just stand up and say, look, we've got a reason for doing it, and here it is. You may or may not like it, but that's our reason, and that's what's going to happen. At least we'd then know that it's not just an oversight, that they're just stubbornly not saying anything about. In which case, as I say, if it's for the purpose of just trying to stop so many people playing Blood Elves, then it's not really a mean-spirited change. It is a balancing change, and they get away with it. But at the same time, yeah, they really should say something one way or the other about it. Next one, Legion Burnouts. It says, I think a common thing when people say they get bored of Legion, I believe they mean burnout on Legion several times over, because Legion clearly had more content than other expansions. And dare I say it, good content. Obviously, that'll be subjective. I would say in terms of quantity, yes. But quality, some people say yes, some people say no. I would say generally it's been pretty good. It says, if anything, there was too much relevant content that needed to be done. That is the key thing for me, actually. And because of that, they didn't spend time doing all the other things added over the expansion, and therefore they think the entire expansion has just been Mythic Plus. I mean, we can't say that when people say they're bored, they mean something else. We have to assume that when people say a thing, unless they contradict themselves, that they mean what they say. But there is certainly, I would say, for some people, there might be an element of burnout. Because, yes, there's been a lot of content you've had to do content that you want to do. Like for raiding, for example, it's pretty obvious for raiding, particularly Mythic raiding. So alongside the Mythic raiding, you also had to do Mythic Pluses. Now, at some times of the expansion, that was quite onerous. You had to do quite a lot because you were chasing like a cap at one point for the artifact power. And even when you weren't, you still wanted to maintain certain levels of it with the Concordance. So that was, yeah, that was a bit annoying, because then what you'd be doing is, and a combination of Mythic Plus, World Quest, and whatever else would give you a, you know, a reasonable amount of artifact power for the time invested. And then at other times it was a bit leaner. It wasn't actually as bad. And BFA, I have hopes that it's not going to be as bad. The problem is there's a lot of unknowns. But at the very least, what we know is you're going to need to do enough Mythic Plus to get your plus 10 done. And then when the halfway patch comes out, plus 15s, it'll do the same seesawing it did in Legion. And then Blizzard, when they said something about the need to do islands, Ian Hazacostas did mention the number 3, as in 3 islands, and then after that diminishing returns. But even that, you know, it's the time taken to do the 3 islands, and well, presumably win 3 islands as well. If you go to one and you don't actually win, then you're doing another one, I guess. But also to find the people to do it. Okay, finding an island group should be a lot easier than finding a dungeon group, and quicker, more specifically. But still, there's the time taken to do that as well. And then there's the world quest, which later on we might, because we don't have the legendary link with those, we might be able to leave alone. But to begin with, we're going to want that rep. You know, for example, for those who don't know, so there's reps that you'll naturally get as you're leveling up through different zones. And you'll need to get friendly with the relevant ones to be able to access the world quests level cap, which of course you want. It's not like in Legion where you've got to go off and do Suramar for an hour before you can unlock them. You can have them unlocked immediately. You get to level cap if you've done enough in each of your 3 zones to have got the relevant friendly reps. It should be quite easy actually. And then that unlocks the world quest. But in at least one of those factions, again, if you do it properly, you should probably have Honoured with one. That gives you access to a 325 item level cloak. All of the factions, you know, because their quartermasters will they'll sell you a cloak, 325 item level, which, you know, when you've just dinged is very tasty. You are going to be wanting to use that. It'll be a while before you get rid of it. You know, dungeons, obviously, eventually you will. Then it's Revered. You can get one to Revered. Then you've got access to, I think it's 340 boots or something. So, you know, you do want to be getting those reps. And World Quest is one of the sources to that. There's missions as well. But then again, you're going to run out, if you don't go out in the world and get your war resources, they're called this time, then you're not going to get the resources needed to send the missions off either. So there's going to be a certain amount of going out in the world and doing those World Quests, even though after time, you can imagine there'll be a situation where you don't need to do so much, if at all. So it might be an easier demand on you in BFA compared to Legion, but those demands are still there. And one of the reasons for something in a minute. So yeah, but it is certainly possible a lot of people just get burnt out of it. I thought Blizzard were quite careless with this. I understand that they can't just throw a load of content in and say, there you go, loads of content. People need to be compelled to do some of it. The problem is when they create compulsions to do too much of it. Like, the world quests and stuff like that should be appealing to casual players and not appealing to Mythic Raiders. If they want to do them, that's fine. But they're going to subscribe anyway. You know, you need to consider, like, levels. So they've already said that they want to see raiding Mythic Plus dungeons and something else that I forget, it's probably PvP related, sod it, on the same level. So let's say Mythic Plus dungeons and raiding on the same level, which is fine. So that's like a parallel thing. But what you shouldn't do is try and encourage them to do each other stuff as well. So you shouldn't have raiders going, oh, but I need to be doing these dungeon things. But if you have to, okay, I'm not going to moan too much about that. But the ones below it, you shouldn't have that compulsion at all. You know, I don't think that raiders should, because islands are much more, you know, casual based. If they don't want to do the islands as a curiosity, I don't think they should have to. I should think they should be able to get the artifact power they need from just doing raiding. You know, but that's just my point of view there. Okay, on to the next, just the last few silly ones really. Implied correction of the consume one less holy power. Yeah, well, this was my rec guide when I was going through the abilities, and Blizzard, you know, used the exact phrase consume one less holy power, because it's one holy power fewer really, or one fewer holy power. And the problem is I can't bring myself to say consume one less holy power, because it's, you know, I would have the voice of my old English teacher in my head going, do you want to say that again? Do you want to have a go at that again? So that's what I have to do there. So yeah, sometimes so when I do my cards which have the tooltips on them, I do basically copy everything Blizzard say on it. I take the numbers out because the numbers are irrelevant, but I put in the text, except when they go on and on and on, when I have to keep it to a certain size myself. but I don't monkey about with their English. So, but if I read it out, I will, yeah, automatically correct it, I'm afraid. Okay, next one now. Semi-big news. So someone, again, thanking me for the Ret Paladin video, which is very nice. I'm glad it is useful to so many people. But I have decided this week, it was sort of coming, I suppose. You know, it wasn't inevitable, but I knew that there was a whole load of things sort of stacking up. So the long and the short of it is, in Battle for Azeroth, I'm not going to be doing Mythic raiding. I'm going to be a full, filthy casual scrub. And I'm bound to talk about it in more detail later on, but just as a quick rundown. It was just stacking up in terms of what you get from Mythic raiding and what you get as a pain in the arse for it. You know, what are the drawbacks of it? And what you get from Mythic raiding, first of all, it's, and I did with the video, explained my need for a competitive hobby. Well, now that I'm getting back into Warhammer, it is possible that that could take over again. I could get back into that. I don't want to talk too much about that here because I could go on for another half an hour about that. But there is potentially another outlet there. And the problem is that I miss the Warhammer so much, and I can't believe I left it this long without playing it. And I really want to get back into it again. And one thing was, I was thinking, well, there are times in World of Warcraft as an endgame raider, a serious raider, where everything else has to fall by the wayside. It's not all the time, but there are some times where everything is just full on. You know, so you'll be doing your normal raid schedule, it'll be the height of progress, but you'll also be running those Mythic Plus dungeons for whatever reason, the islands and whatever else, and it'll be completely full on. And the only thing that can take precedence over that is work. But therein comes another thing in terms of one of the things that almost sort of flipped it over. At my work, where I am at the moment, I've been there for 6 years now. So I've got into, you know, I've got a lot of things built up. I sort of know what I'm doing from year to year. There's always new things, and you're always adapting things for your specific classes as well, the individuals in those classes. But that's, you know, that's okay, you just do that. But I'm going to be teaching a new course next year, and it's because we had a couple of people leave from that department. So I'm going to be teaching something in another department, engineering, and I'm going to need to do a lot of work for that. Because I've not taught it before. I don't have, you know, there's other people's resources, but I have my way of teaching things. So I'm going to have to develop my own resources. So that will add in a certain amount of time. And then you imagine yourself, okay, so let's say there's a particular point in the raiding thing where it's full on with the raiding. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in there. But let's say it's full on with work as well. Well, there is going to be just such an event, because when the raids open up, that coincides exactly, and I mean to the week, when I'm going to be starting teaching. So it's going to be full on at work, and the work has to take precedence. That means inevitably things could, you know, squeeze on the raiding there. So that wouldn't be great. And it wasn't the thing, but it was one of those things that did that. And then there's lots of other things as well. Although I expect BFA to be lighter on the forced non-raid content than Legion, it's still there. And it didn't used to be there at all. You've got to bear in mind, before Legion, it was not there at all. In every expansion, whether it's vanilla all the way up to and including Warlords of Draenor, if you just wanted to raid and do nothing else, then you could. Now, I always used to do a few things as well, but it was on a casual basis when I wanted to, when I needed to. You need to farm a bit of things for your consumables, but apart from that, you know, just make sure you're up with the raids, spend a certain amount of time reading up on things, analysing logs, all that business. But you can do that on a ad hoc basis when you're free to do it. You're not having to do it certain times, and you have to do all that as well anyway, with the new dynamic in raiding, plus the extra stuff. And then, as I say, coming back to the Warhammer stuff, so let's say I find a club that, you know, goes on a particular night. For example, in the local club where I am, I joined the Facebook group on it. I'm going to try and learn a bit about it for when I'm ready to go down there, which is not yet. And I have worries that they're not going to play enough of the fantasy, which is what I want to play. When I'm looking down it, I don't really see evidence that they play that. So that means I have to go further afield. Now, I know that there's a club in Grimsby, which is where I used to live, at Games Workshop, but that's Thursday nights. Well, that's a raid night. I know there's one in Nottingham if I want to really go to town, but go to the headquarters of it in the whole world. And that's a Wednesday night. So these are typical raid nights as well. So, you know, it would hamper that. And there's lots of other little things as well, which I'm not going to go about here. But nonetheless, it's all just stacked up to the point where I'm thinking, I was looking ahead at Mythic raiding and BFA, and I'm thinking, I've done endgame raiding a lot of years. I'm never going to compete at the level I've competed at in the past. So that it's not like I'm, you know, ascending stage or anything like that. I'm always going to be competing at a lower level. And the frustrations inherent with that as well, whenever we do something that's not terribly efficient or something like that, or phrases are used like, oh, we'll do it this way because it works or something like that, even though it doesn't work as well. Anything like that is going to sort of reduce the enjoyment of it. And it just got to the point where I was looking ahead at BFA and I was thinking, do you know what? I'm just seeing raiding. I'm just seeing the chores in raiding, and I'm not seeing the end enjoyment of it. And so then I'm thinking, well, you know, I've obviously done enough of it. It doesn't fundamentally change as well. It doesn't have to. I'm not saying it should, but it doesn't fundamentally change. Like you look at fight. I mean, I've looked at fights, for example, in Uldir, and I've just thought, yeah, first boss, I'm just saying, yeah, that's like Grobulus. You just do the same tactics as that. You know, next boss, yeah, it's just like this boss. And you see, you know, mechanics come in different orders and the artwork's different, but you see the same. It's very rare you get an actual genuinely new mechanic. And we had one on Kill Jaden, but very rarely do you get a genuinely new mechanic. So you also start to see the same things. You think, well, do you know, I've done it, and I've done it at a higher level than I'm doing it now anyway. And even though the guild I'm in at the moment is completing all of it a lot quicker than the guilds that I was in for most of Legion, and that would have been way better, that would have helped my enjoyment of it, is it really enough? And I've just come to the conclusion now. So that still took long enough, and that was an edited version, so I'll leave that one there. And I think I'm going to sort of call it to an end there. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, throw your comments down below. Don't forget, try and say where that mailbox is, and give me a tough time trying to put them on. Maybe we'll get enough people saying where it is that instead of just splashing everyone's copied and pasted response on the screen, I have to do a scrolling text thing. Let's see if we can get to that point. If you have enjoyed it, of course, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if it's your first time here and you'd like to watch more of this. Obviously, check out the channel first to make sure it is. I'd much rather you didn't subscribe than to subscribe and unsubscribe. Don't like the unsubscribes. And share it with anyone else who might be interested. Until next time, I will see you later when it's going to be even hotter because it's even worse tomorrow.